Welcome back to design analysis. In this video, we'll be deconstructing this beautiful shirt. So let's get right into it. As usual, we'll be deconstructing this under the following elements. And of course, the first question to ask is, what can we see? Okay, so what we see here is an oversized shirt. A shirt with a relaxed fit, boxy kind of fit. So what do you think the silhouette of this one will be? Boxy silhouette, or let's just go with oversized silhouette, right? So let me grab my pen. Let's change that. So we'll go with oversized silhouette, right? And the fabric, an up close look. This looks like a denim, something textured, something very structured, cotton, twill, weave, So if it's not denim, it's something in that line, right? So I think I'll just go with denim. That kind of fabric. So the next is the balance. Of course, this is a symmetrical garment. So it is symmetrical, right? So the construction now, what can we see? The neckline. Of course, we can see a collar. Yes. Whether one piece or two piece, there's a collar. And we can see the button stand or button wrap. And you can see the slightly curved details. Let me change to red. You can see this slightly curved details at the edge, something to just make it different, I guess, right? You can see that it has a wide hem, same thing on the sleeve too, right? We can see the pockets. This looks like a welt pocket. Of course, we can see the flap, but you cannot see the pocket bag that will be inside. A welt pocket is not stitched to the fabric, so there's a pocket bag on the inside if there's a pocket, right? So, and of course we can see the sleeve. The sleeve is also a straight one. So we have lots of details. We have a shirt collar, we have welt pockets, we have straight sleeves, we have button wrap or button stand, right? And all this just on the front piece. And on the back, we have this flap, we have this yoke. Of course, this is the yoke, and you can see the yoke. This is where it is stitched, but the yoke also has this flap details, right? And the flap goes into the armhole right there. So the flap has two sides. So this edge right here is unfold, so there's this place that we can see, and then there's one that wraps inwards that we can't see, right? So we'll discuss more of that when we get to the patterning, right? And then of course we have this pleats detail. What kind of pleat is this? This is an inverted pleat. An inverted pleat and box pleats are like two sides of a coin. So when you invert, when it's the placing that makes a difference. So when you place the pleats close to each other, touching like that, that's an inverted pleat. Some people will call it a kiss plate because the edges of the fabric they meet, right? So on the other side, it will reflect as a box plate. Just like if you have a box plate, the pleats are away from each other, but they touch on the other side too. So right here we have an inverted pleat, right? So we have a yoke with flap, and we also have inverted pleat details, right? So moving on. So what kind of pattern is needed for this? What kind of pattern do you think we need for this? You need a shirt pattern, of course. If you don't have a shirt pattern, you can adapt your basic block into a shirt pattern, right? But of course, let's just say we need a shirt pattern, shirt block for this. right? Next, so let's just talk about the guesstimation of the length. So the length of the shirt is not the usual length of a shirt. This looks like it stops right at the upper hip, right? So the length is right here, like at the upper hip. That's where you get the length. It's not right here, right? And of course the details, you can see the chest area, that's where the pocket flap is, right? So the pocket flap is right at the chest, and every other thing is just, you can see the shoulders. Let's move in. You can see the shoulders, they're not really where the shoulder will be. That's because it's an oversized shirt, so we'll discuss all that when we're making the pattern, right? So now to the pattern. So as I said, you can adapt your basic block into a shirt block. How do you go about that? So if you look closely, the dotted lines are our basic block. You can see how fitted they look compared to the adaptation for the shirt block. So what we're going to do is, for the back, we'll just leave the darts as is, because that will add to the increase in the shoulder length, right? And then we'll just raise that slightly, and then we'll do the same increase here on the front bodies, and a slight increase in the neck line to about 0.5 or 1 cm, right? And then we're going to transfer the shoulder dart away from the shoulder, a little of it into the armhole, and then we'll just leave the rest in the waistline, right, for the fullness, because it's just straight. Like I said, it's like a boxy silhouette, so it is just like a box, right? So that's what we do. So, but for the front, we'll be sure to add a button stand. How do you do that? From the CF, this is the CF here, you add your button stand allowance. It can be 1 inch, it can be 1.5, depending on how wide you want it, right? Not too wide, right? So when you do that, and of course the sleeve too, we're going to adapt the sleeve too. We're going to lower the crown. So you're going to lower the crown, and we're going to increase the biceps. We're going to increase the biceps, or top arm, whatever it is you call it, right? And then once we're done with all the adaptation, what we have is something like this. Oh, I forgot to mention that you will also increase. So right here, you're going to cut a bit off here for the shoulder, right? And then add it to the back pattern, right? The reason is, in a sleeve, in a shirt pattern, the seam of the shoulder seam doesn't sit right on the shoulder. It comes a little bit forward. It is usually noticeable in menswear, right? So you cut a little bit off from the front, and then you attach it to the back. So that gives the shoulder seam of a shirt, right? So once you're through with all the adaptation, this is what you get, this boxy flat block, right? And of course you reduce the length, because we want something that is sitting on the hip. We'll reduce the length, and of course we'll reduce the length of the sleeve, so the sleeve doesn't look like it's a long, the sleeve is not that long. So starting with the front, rather starting with the back. So the flap, now let's go back to the picture. You can see the flap here shows the stitch length. The flap here shows the stitch area, right? Double stitch, double needle stitch, right? That is where the yoke, the stitch of the yoke is, okay? But the yoke is one piece. It extends into the flap, and the part of the flap that we don't see, right? And of course it flows smoothly into the armhole. So let's explain that. So how do you go about that? So this first line, this is the stitch line, right? That is the first line. So this here, we are going to trace the depth or the width of the flap, right? But when you want to cut the pattern, you are going to cut it from this first line. Why? Because you need the bodies here, the remaining of the bodies, to be able to fit into, so that you will not shorten the armhole in the process, right? You need these lower bodies to be able to fit into this, right? So once you cut this on this side, then you have this, right? But then you'll come back to trace the flap, right? And once you trace the flap, this is what you have. And then you're going to trace the flap. It's either you trace it with this side being unfold, so when you open it up you have this other side, or you trace it, and then if you're doing it digitally, of course you will have to duplicate and then transform it to the opposite side. You're transforming it vertically, right? And this is what you have. But if you were doing it on paper, you will just trace this and keep this side unfold, and by the time you open it, this is what you have. You need this because of the opposite sides, so that you can get the shape of this armor, right? I hope you understand what I'm talking about. Right, so all this piece and this, you're going to merge them into one, right? And then of course this is the lower part. It's just intact the way it is, right? I'm just showing this dotted line to know that the flap was traced from it, right? And once everything is attached together, it's going to sit right there. Okay, so once everything is merged together, this is what you're going to have, right? So this is the unfold line. This is the fold line. So when you fold it back, it will enter here, and this also will be joined to it in on the wrong side. They will all be joined together there, right? Sorry, I think I forgot to include a seam allowance for this, but this is the CB and it is unfold. So for the lower part, you are just going to include, this is the CB, this is the CB right here, that's the CB line. This is just the pleats for the inverted pleats that is on the garment, right? So you can add as much as 4 inches thereabouts. 4 inches will give you a neat pleat, right? And then unfold, of course, and then when you pleat it, you have that effect. So that's for the back piece. So for the front piece now, for the front, you already added the button stand, right? So some button stands can be in one piece with the facing, because usually button stands will have a facing, that part that you fold inwards. But because of the curved effect on the shirt that we noticed earlier, you will not be able to have a one piece facing, right? So that means you will have to trace that button stand separate, right? Then modify it, give it that curve that we noticed, right? So you can of course do the curving first before you now trace it out. Trace out the button stand and add seam allowance. Of course, indicates the placement of the buttons and the buttonholes. I can't believe I forgot buttonholes. And of course indicates where you want the flap to be, right? That's that for the front piece. So now I indicated here 2 styles of collar. You can have a shirt collar that is one piece like this, or you can have shirt collar with the lower mandarin, the shirt stand, and the upper one that are sewn together, right? And of course we have the flap. So for a welt pocket, you need the welt, the pocket flap. You need this. Sorry, excuse me. This is the flap. This is just a pocket bag, and then this one is where you attach the fusible to and where you sew, right? Like this. So that's that for that. And then of course the sleeve is just a straight sleeve, except if you're doing for a big size with big armor, and then you can decide to taper it a little, but I think it's just a straight sleeve, and then the hem is added, and all the other details that we noticed, like the double stitching and all that, are added while sewing. Yeah, it's a huge one. Okay guys, I think that is it for the pattern. Oh, of course, before I forget, our teaser for the week. So we talked about pleats in this video, and I explained inverted and box pleats, how they are like 2 sides of a coin. So tell me, what other pleats are there? Which one is your favorite? Which one do you think is easy to construct? Let me know in the comment section. And thank you to those who have been taking time to answer in the comment section. I hope you learned a thing or two, and I look forward to the next one. Bye.